Gentleman yields. Chair now recognizes the ranking member of the whole committee, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Nadler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In April 2023, GAO placed management of the federal prison system on its high-risk list, in part due to staffing challenges. In which positions are vacancies most acute?
We're focused mostly on our correctional officers.
And what is your short-term and long-term plan to increase the number of correctional officers to meet the needs of the system?
Thank you for the question. We have done so many things. We've used every incentive that we have at our fingertips, both recruitment and retention incentives. We've changed how we're marketing and trying to hire our correctional officers. We increased correctional officers' base salary by $2,000. We waived the maximum age entry, from 37 to 39. We pay a $1,000 recruitment bonus to any employee that successfully recruits someone and brings them onto the Bureau. And as of May 2024, we received direct hire authority for our correctional officers nationwide, which has proven very successful. And then, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, I think the primary focus is really that base salary and working with the department and OPM for a special salary rate.
Thank you. According to GAO, some of the staffing concerns relate to difficulty recruiting, while other challenges relate to what the GAO called, quote, the growing use of overtime and augmentation. What are you doing to reduce overtime, and specifically the use of mandatory overtime?
Thank you, Congressman. As I said in my opening remarks, it wears and tears. As I walk through the halls of my institutions, while our correctional officers are so proud to tell me of the work that they're doing, they also share how exhausted they are, and it's driven by overtime and augmentation. So our focus to reduce that is hiring, is to get our institutions fully staffed. I just visited our facility in Michigan, Milan, Michigan, where it is nearly fully staffed, and just the tenor and tone of that institution was so different because they weren't buried with overtime and augmentation.
And would adjusting the pay scale or GS scale of correctional officers upward across the board be more advantageous to BOP in retaining staff and cost savings than paying millions of dollars in overtime?
Congressman, any way that we can pay our people more will actually in the long run cost less than overtime, yes.
Thank you. You have made it clear that you will not tolerate employee misconduct of any kind and that this issue is among your highest priorities. What specific steps are you taking in this regard?
So many. This is something we've focused on out of the gate. When I first started as director 2 years ago, we had under 30 people who worked in our Office of Internal Affairs. We now have almost 150 individuals. We've realigned their reporting authority so they report directly to headquarters, not up through the warden, to remove any perceived or real barriers to that. We are working very closely with the Office of the Inspector General. I personally meet with him quarterly. Our teams meet regularly to ensure that the backlog and the communication is wide open there as well.
And in what way is the Department of Justice assisting your efforts to root out and address employee misconduct?
They've been incredibly helpful. The Deputy Attorney General herself and I have met directly with the U.S. attorneys to talk about the importance of prosecuting employee misconduct out of the Federal Bureau of Prisons. They have been very receptive to that. I have met with U.S. attorneys regularly in the last 2 years, multiple times in the last 2 years, to share that very sentiment.
Thank you. In recent months, there have been a series of reports documenting BOP's continued widespread use of restrictive housing with devastating and deadly results. What steps is BOP taking to reduce the use of restrictive housing?
This is an area where we still have room for advancement. I have a long history of reforming restrictive housing. As I was talking to the union earlier, it's a tool we'll always have inside our institutions, but we need to limit it even more dramatically. It has dropped slightly since I started. Probably the biggest thing that we have in the works is we've been working very closely with the National Union to revise our policy around discipline for those in our custody. And as it is written right now, it reduces the sanction time in restrictive housing by almost 84%. So once that is passed, I think we'll see substantial
change. And what has BOP done to address the high rate of suicide in restrictive housing?
So we have mandated that individuals are double-celled in restrictive housing in order to ensure that they have human contact while they're in restrictive housing.
Thank you. Before becoming director of BOP, you often spoke about the harms of solitary confinement and the benefits of alternatives to the practice. What are the benefits that you see in alternatives to solitary confinement where people are separated from the general population but are provided real and effective out-of-cell programming and services?
Yeah, the research
Gentleman's
is,
time's expired, but you may go ahead and answer the question.
thank you, Mr. Chair. The research is very clear. The more normal and humane environments that we provide for the adults in custody, the safer they are, the less wear and tear on them as well as our employees. And so we have many alternatives to restrictive housing that we've engaged in over the last couple of years, including our step-down units, our reintegration units, our GROW units, which actually prevent people from actually going to restrictive housing. So we're taking lots of steps to see those numbers drop because we know very clearly the negative impacts of restrictive housing on those individuals.
Thank you, Director. I yield back.